Fernando Mendoza just stepped to the podium at the NFL Combine, and Raider Nation, this felt different. This wasn't just another quarterback answering routine media questions. This felt like a moment, because in that press conference, Mendoza confirmed something fans have been waiting to hear. He met formally with the Las Vegas Raiders. Not a quick handshake, not a hallway hello, a real interview. The full room, the coaching staff, film breakdown, whiteboard work. And the energy? Confident, focused, locked in. When Mendoza described the meeting, he didn't sugarcoat it. He said it was fantastic. But what really stood out was how detailed he got. He talked about the coaches drawing up plays and asking him to walk through them in real time. That matters. Because that's not a personality test. That's not small talk. That's a football IQ test. The Raiders weren't just evaluating arm strength or athleticism. They wanted to see how his mind works under pressure, how quickly he processes information, how he reads a defense before and after the snap. And from everything we've seen about Mendoza, that's exactly where he thrives. He even mentioned that the teaching style in that room felt similar to what he experienced at Indiana. That alignment is huge. When a quarterback walks into a system that mirrors what he already understands, development speeds up dramatically. That's not a coincidence. That's fit. Then came the topic that really lit up the room: Tom Brady. Mendoza has already made it clear this offseason that Brady is his football icon. But hearing him talk about it at the Combine? That was different. He didn't hesitate. He called Brady the greatest quarterback of all time, not just great, but by a wide margin. And when he said it, you could hear it in his voice. The respect wasn't scripted. It wasn't media trained. It was genuine. He talked about what it would mean to be mentored by Brady, about learning daily, about absorbing knowledge from someone who's mastered every detail of the game. Now, here's the interesting part. Brady wasn't physically in the room during Mendoza's formal interview. He was on the phone briefly. And sure, that's cool. But let's be honest, if you're potentially selecting a quarterback #1 overall, that face-to-face presence matters. It hits differently when the greatest to ever do it is sitting across from you. Still, the fact that Mendoza lit up just mentioning the possibility tells you something. This is a quarterback who wants to learn, who understands legacy, who studies history. And speaking of history, we need to talk about the number he dropped at the end of the presser. That wasn't random. That's where Tom Brady was drafted. When Mendoza was asked what he'd say to teams if he didn't go #1 overall, he stayed composed, said there would be no hard feelings, acknowledged the talent in this draft class. Professional, respectful. But then he slid in 199. That's not arrogance. That's a chip on the shoulder. That's a young quarterback reminding the league that draft position doesn't define destiny. And Raider Nation? That mindset travels. Now, let's shift to something that really matters on the field: chemistry. Mendoza talked at length about how his connection with teammates at Indiana evolved throughout the season. From week 1 to week 16, he described steady growth, not flashes, growth. He specifically mentioned back shoulder throws multiple times. That detail is important. Back shoulder timing doesn't just happen. It requires trust, repetition, precision. By the second half of the season, he said those throws were automatic, receivers making contested catches, turning upfield, creating yards after the catch. That's quarterback-receiver synchronization at a high level. And when you look at the Raiders' current roster, you start imagining what that could look like in silver and black. Mendoza also spoke about Omar Cooper Jr., comparing him to a prime Deebo Samuel. That comparison wasn't random either. Raiders head coach Clint Kubiak worked in San Francisco's system, the Shanahan tree, where Deebo thrived as a hybrid weapon. In 2023, under Kubiak's involvement, Deebo had one of his most productive seasons. So when Mendoza describes a receiver in those terms, he's speaking a language this coaching staff understands. That connection matters. But what might matter even more is Mendoza's mindset. He openly admitted that coming out of high school, he was ranked around 134th among quarterbacks in his class. He called himself raw, and he owned it. That's not weakness, that's awareness. Instead of letting that ranking define him, he used it as fuel. He talked about obsessing over the small margins: nutrition, discipline, repetition, consistency. He said NFL games are decided by a handful of plays, a few drives, tiny details. That perspective sounds a lot like someone who understands what separates good from elite. And when he described why he loves football, that's when it really clicked. He sees the game as strategy, as chess. He said you don't have to be the biggest or fastest if you can be the smartest. There's no cookie-cutter formula for a superstar. That mindset fits perfectly in a culture trying to rebuild the right way. Now, zooming out, where does this leave the Raiders? After that formal interview, it feels like we're one step closer. Management is clearly doing its due diligence. They're studying him, challenging him, testing him. But if you watched that presser, you saw it. Confidence, excitement, belief. He looked like someone who feels good about how that meeting went. And while everyone focuses on the quarterback, head coach Clint Kubiak is quietly shaping the bigger picture. He recently made it clear that the Raiders are prioritizing finding a fullback this offseason. That tells you everything about the offensive identity he wants. Kubiak comes from the Shanahan system: heavy play action, two-back sets, physical running game. Fullbacks aren't optional in that scheme. They're foundational. Names are already circulating. Internal options like J.J. Piguet or prospects like Eli Heidenreich out of Navy. And Kubiak isn't stopping there. He mentioned bringing in another running back to complement Ashton Janney. A two-man backfield. Fresh legs deep into the season. That's commitment to physical football. That's building from the ground up. When you connect all the dots, a cerebral quarterback who values timing and detail, a coach installing a disciplined run-first foundation, and a potential mentorship linked to Tom Brady, you start seeing the blueprint. This isn't hype. This is direction. So, Raider Nation, the question is simple. Is Fernando Mendoza the future of this franchise? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more in-depth Raiders breakdowns like this, make sure you hit subscribe, because this offseason is just getting started, and the silver and black might be closer to a new era than we think.